Eviction off the North Circular Road. The call out to stop an eviction had brought Manus away from his warm fire and into the freezing cold night. His chest was tight and he found it difficult to breathe. He had to stop a moment to rest. He couldn't tell if it was all psychosomatic. Evictions, by their nature, are confrontational. Was that all it was? He feared confrontation. He tried to think rationally around his fear. What was the worst that could happen? He'd get thrown to the ground and arrested by the guards. No big deal. He would show no resistance, give the guards no excuse. He got his breath back and went on. But his chest tightened again as he walked closer to the site of the eviction. He wondered if he would collapse as he got there. He wondered why he was going. When he was 6 years old, his mother and her 4 children were threatened with eviction. Miraculously, they avoided homelessness, but the threat of it hung over the family, scared and scarred it for years to come. These thoughts were with him as he approached the site of the eviction just off the North Circular Road. Perhaps 30 guards trying to evict 5 people from an unoccupied house that the 5 had squatted. Perhaps there were 30 activists trying to stop the eviction. Some guards stood in the path leading up to the doorway. The activists stood outside the very small garden path. Some of the squatters hung out the upstairs window and exchanged taunts with the guards. The guards say the squatters must vacate the premises. The squatters say the guards must get an eviction order first. Manus had seen this scenario before. Sometimes the guards will smash the doors in and arrest the squatters for trespassing with intent to do something illegal like intent to damage. This charge will likely be dismissed before it reaches court. Sometimes, though, if there's enough activists, the guards will pack up and come back in a day or two as summons or some other legal document, like an eviction order. The guard of arms and the verbal exchange between the squatters and the guards has attracted the other occupants of the street. Manus's age lent him a certain amount of legitimacy, and he spoke to the owner of the house next door. What were they like as neighbours? The homeowner said he didn't know, that they had just moved in. He didn't seem that aggravated by having a squatters moving in next door to him, but he wasn't over keen on the ever-growing louder crowd of guards and activists gathered outside his door. Most of the activists were young and unknown to Manus. One asked him what he was doing there. I said, just to show support, solidarity. He recognised a few older heads too, though. S was there, as usual, in his friendliest, least threatening or confrontational mode. He was conversing with some guards. He was trying to explain the required legal procedure to evict people from a building. He stopped to give Manus an awkward hug. Still trying to convert them, Manus said, and continued, I'm at it all the time myself. He went on then talking half to the guards and half to S. I'm too old for this. High blood pressure and all. Remember that if it all kicks off. He emphasised this fact to one of the guards, who responded in a friendly manner. Another guard scowled. For some people, putting a uniform on gives them an excuse or reason to deny their humanness. Although, to tell the absolute truth, often some of the young activists don't give uniforms much chance to show their humanness. Despite the disdain he sometimes got for it, Manus didn't think the ACAB philosophy was a reductive way forward. Manus often tried to get the message across to the guards that he was not their enemy. He thought evictions were in general morally wrong, and that this particular eviction should be accompanied by some legal documentation rather than just brute force. Whose enemy did that make him? The night wore on in some kind of standoff. Manus was kind of hopeful. The guards had tried and failed to smash the front door in. They looked foolish. Many of them felt foolish as the squatters shouted out about the number of homeless in Dublin and the number of empty houses. Manus was freezing cold and his chest still hurt. One of the young activists approached him. She recognised him from somewhere but wasn't sure where. Was he at the Ardèche? He wanted to tell her that he was an ignoramus from the north, didn't really even know what an Ardèche translated as. Big meeting? He wanted to explain that probably due to all the drink and drugs he had used for decades and all the punches and kicks his poor skull had endured in his early life, he had problems remembering even the simplest of new words. But that would all have been a bit much to explain as they stood there on the street surrounded by cops and activists. Manus actually knew who she was. His memory worked sometimes. He had put her in a young Aggie that came over a few years before. A chunky, solid woman, strong activist. Attractive too, he supposed. He'd seen her at evictions and protests and up at the Radical Book Fair in Belfast a few weeks before. You might have seen me up at the Radical Book Fair in Belfast, he offered. Yeah, it must have been there, she said. He had been dismayed by the lack of stalls at the fair. She had been impressed by the vibe. Manus had sat in on one of the talks at the fair that had been on the importance of joining unions. A good talk, but not applicable to the likes of Manus, who had seldom worked full stop and had worked even less in legal, taxable, unionisable jobs. And as a pensioner, was unlikely to ever work in one again. It was novel for Manus, having a young woman come to converse with him. The old man was still a man. From a distance, on a bad streetlight, he still looked like a man. His body, for all his fearful prognosis, actually still worked reasonably well. He had often joked that when he died, they could lay him in a box and he wouldn't complain. But until then, he would kick away any box anyone tried to put him in. He wondered what box the young woman put him in. The old fucker. Seemed a difficult box to kick off. She said she kind of wished the squatters would stop shouting out the window as it was disturbing kids on the street and the adults who had to get up in the morning. Manus nodded agreement, but really he didn't think the noise of the squatters mattered much, especially in comparison to the noise of the battering ram. The guards tried again and again with the battering ram to break the door down. It was kind of comical. You could hear the squatters use the power tool to screw beams into the door frame on the other side. It seemed to Manus that the guards would have to knock the whole front of the house down before they got the door to give. It really looked like the squatters and activists, in regard for the law, might prevail. 5 people were going to have somewhere to sleep, and all the guards and their vans could go off and guard the peace. Manus was sure that was going to happen. But then he got a whisper that the house was actually owned by the head of the Garda Ombudsman. Oh, fuck. If it's anything to do with one of their own, they're not going to back down. He was sure of that. And sure enough, there was 2 special unit vans. The special unit had pepper spray. Manus got well to the back of the activists. He had no intention of facing up to pepper spray. A guard managed to break into the house through the window, which had been barricaded up, but not sufficiently. Interaction between the special unit and the activists intensified about then. The activists insisting that the special unit are breaking the law. Close person between some of the activists and the special unit guards. Mostly young males on both sides, caught up in some biological behavioural trait, standing up to their full height and snarling. The guards tell the activists to stand back and then pepper spray them. Manus was well out of range. A dozen ordinary guards had lined up across the road, blocking the general public from the access to the view. It looked like mayhem. Special unit black uniforms, battering ram, Garda sticks, pepper spray. The front window smashed, the door frame smashed. Activists unable to walk land on the pavement with the after effect of the pepper spray. Manus stood in the road, well away from the confrontation spots, and stood facing the line of ordinary guards. Manus shouted at the guards, "Are you the guardians of the peace?" No one answered, so he shouted again, "Are you the guardians of the peace?" The officer in charge of the line of ordinary guards came forward. She actually looked like one of the reasonable kind. He had noticed her earlier. She quoted some section at him and added, "Can you clear the street, please?" "Thank you," she said as he turned and left the street. At the end of the street, young activists were gathered, some lying flat on their backs on the pavement, people pouring water into their eyes. Young activists angry, and for many shocked at the Garda response to what, as far as they understood the law, should have been a civil matter dealt with in a court of law. Manus was not shocked by the guards. The guardians of peace they were called, but they were more accurately guardians of corporate interests, which is a piece of a kind if you go along with corporate interests, which go hand in hand with empty houses and homeless people. Injured activists were offered a nearby space to recuperate by other activists. Manus thought to offer his own home, But it was further away and he didn't bother. Let's walk back home on his own. His chest still hurt, nervous tension, or a heart attack, or trapped wind, or just all psychosomatic. He didn't know.